ahead and go into the second segment, which is going to be about the No Bull Tour, starring yours truly, ex-Chicago Bulls players, and Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan isn't a part of this, though. I should make that very clear. Michael Jordan is not a part of this tour with ex-Bulls players. This is a tour on the other Chicago Bulls players that were also on the 91, 92, 93, 96, 97, 98 teams that you probably don't really hear about because Michael Jordan. So these players, Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant, Luke Longley, just to name a few, those players are in Australia, are in Australia's league, like in Australia's National Basketball League. Scottie Pippen's the president of that league. And they're going on tour to talk about Michael Jordan in Australia because I guess Michael Jordan is still like really, really popular to kids in Australia, and like the stories that they tell him is like really popular. So, I mean, granted, then again, they are pretty popular now, so that's my bad. Pardon me for that. But the tour begins tomorrow, February 23rd, and the idea of this tour is really not, like, it's in the name, but if you didn't know, like, if you don't have a potty mouth like a lot of people do over the internet, then you probably don't know exactly what this tour is about. So, essentially, this tour is going to be about talking trash about MJ. There was no sugarcoating it. They were going to really get into MJ and the things that were done via The Last Dance. Now, what do I mean by the things done via The Last Dance? Well, The Last Dance, I'm sure all of you have heard about it before, but if you haven't, it's a documentary about Michael Jordan and his final year on the Chicago Bulls and his entire career as a Chicago Bulls player, the entire careers of the rest of the players, all those important things about the dynasty Chicago Bulls era. And that documentary was centered around Michael Jordan, obviously, because Michael Jordan was the center of that franchise. However, in that documentary, there were a lot of things that was said, and there were a lot of things that were revealed that a lot of the players didn't like. Scottie Pippen was very vocal about these sort of problems, and he's been adamant about them. Like he said numerous times he does not like the documentary of The Last Dance, and he felt that it did a lot of the players dirty because Michael Jordan's never going to admit this or not, but that documentary was made to boost his legacy. And he's not going to admit it, but that's essentially what it was. Because around the time it was being released, LeBron had already won his 4th title, and he was also on track to breaking Kareem's total points record. So the argument for Michael Jordan was growing a little slim, so there needed to be a little documentary to be released. And again, just to remind people, this documentary, it was kept in a vault. It was kept locked away until a specific moment. And it's kind of ironic how that moment was when LeBron seemed to be getting a lot closer to MJ than MJ would like. But I digress. And regardless, the things that were being said on The Last Dance, they weren't really friendly. There were a lot of things that were left out in that documentary that I feel shouldn't have been left out. And again, they were left out just because to sort of boost the legacy of Michael Jordan and sort of enhance the opinions that people had about him. I mean, there's a whole meme around that documentary. It became personal to me. Now everybody, whenever they have a great game, they always say, "Oh, that player took it personally," because that's what Michael Jordan emphasized on that documentary. It was "Oh, he's gonna say this about me. Oh, so that's how you gonna play it. All right, that's all I needed." became personal to me. That was Michael Jordan throughout like half that documentary, just constantly saying that constantly bringing up stories about how people and other players, like, they would do things that would rub him the wrong way, and he would use that as fuel to sort of like give him a boost in playing and like drive his energy, for lack of a better term. That was the main theme around that entire Last Dance documentary. And well, again, like I said, a lot of things were overlooked. An example that comes right off the top of my head, and one of the things that was overlooked, is the 1996 series with the Orlando Magic. He doesn't talk about Horace Grant getting injured in the first game, which was arguably the main reason why the Chicago Bulls were able to sweep that year. Because I mentioned this in the previous podcast, but I'll say it again. At the time they lost to the Orlando Magic in 1995, the Bulls were lacking a power forward. Then the 1995-96 offseason rolls around, and they get a power forward in Dennis Rodman. So now they have the matchup set for when they go up against Orlando Magic. And then Horace Grant gets injured. And he doesn't talk about that. He talks about it as if he barely even like touches the Orlando Magic because he ended up losing to them. But he talks about it as if the Orlando Magic, like they were at 100%. And the only thing that Michael Jordan needed to win that series was a good power forward, and boom, he wins. Like, that was the perception that he made and it gave off. And it's not a fan favorite to just give off that kind of impression to any of your teammates. If it's like, oh, he's only giving the credit to himself, he's not giving the credit to anyone else, because the Bulls were a fantastic team. They won one less game without him the year that he went to go play baseball. So that team was a very good team, and they made it to the Eastern Conference semifinals, pardon me. And they lost in 7 games. So with that in mind, and the fact that with that in mind, it's really like, it's sort of degrading if you are any of the teammates, because it's like, wow, we put in all that work just for him to take all the credit. Like, really? And like, while I do like see some truth in some of the statements, like I do believe that he definitely did take certain things personally, I think a lot of it tended to be a little over-exaggerated. In fact, not a little, greatly over-exaggerated, especially to the extent where like it got Scottie Pippen to be upset. I mean, like that was his dynamic duo. He didn't win a championship without Scottie, and the fact that Scottie like is actively upset about this and having this no bull tour because he was upset about this speaks a lot. And it just affects like sort of a lot of people. I don't really think this affects MJ's legacy, honestly. Like, I don't know why Pippen is doing this other than the fact that he is upset, but it's not really going to change many people's perception on Michael Jordan. Everybody already knows that he's the best player and that he's the best player that the NBA has seen. I personally don't think so, but obviously a lot of casuals still think so. So he's still iconic, and I don't think this would do much unless he says something that's like really, really offensive. Like, I don't really see this as making much noise. I'm probably going to cover this again in a different podcast if a quote does come up and it does circulate and it does make a lot of noise. But other than that, like, again, it's The Last Dance. It was dramatic. It was degrading to a lot of the players. Ooh, one of the things that I completely forgot to mention, like, about that Last Dance was sort of how, I'm trying to find the right way to word this. How, like, I mean, yeah, he would skim through a lot of the things in the documentary and a lot of important things, like, for example, his performances against the Seattle Supersonics. He barely talked about that series and how he almost blew a 3-0 lead in the finals. He didn't talk about it because he had really bad numbers in that series. But obviously he wasn't going to talk about that series as much as he was going to talk about the other series. And another thing, there was something else. Oh, he also, again, like with the perception thing and how he adjusted people's perceptions, he influenced the like perception that Michael Jordan wasn't at 100% when he was returning to baseball. That's sort of the excuse that a lot of people give MJ for not winning against the Magic in '95. And that's an excuse that he gave himself in the documentary. But in reality, that he gave that excuse, and he gave the power forward excuse, the fact that they were lacking in the power forward. But in reality, Michael Jordan was always at his peak when he was in the... It didn't matter. He was always at his peak. I said this in previous podcasts. Averaging 31 points per game in the playoffs is prime Michael Jordan. That is peak Michael Jordan, and he did that in the series against the Orlando Magic. So he completely like shoved that under the rug, and he shoved a lot of things under the rug, which is why these Bulls players are doing this. And does it affect his legacy to a lot of fans? No. To me, it definitely does. Because why do you have to put down a lot of your teammates to sort of make yourself sound greater? Like, obviously, like, I get that narcissistic... I understand that narcissistic mentality because, like it or not, he was the best player, and he was going to let you know that he was the best player, and he's going to act like he was the best player, rightfully so. I totally understand that. But in terms of, like, when I think of, like, who the GOAT is, and a lot of people try to use LeBron's, LeBron isn't humble because he thinks he's the GOAT. Yeah, well, MJ isn't humble either. So I personally use that to sort of like affect his legacy because it's like they do the exact same thing. They both believe that they're the best players that the league has ever seen. So I sort of use that as like an argument for people who believe that MJ is the best player and that LeBron sort of like he's trying to force that narrative. When in reality it's not forced because he is the best player. But my lights are falling. Hold on just one second. But yeah, that's sort of the gist of like why these Chicago Bulls players are having this tour in the first place. And do I think it's a good idea? It's interesting. I don't think it's a good idea though. I'm not a big fan of going on tour to talk trash about someone who isn't even in the room. That is not my thing. It's not my personal not something that I would want to do, especially since it's so long ago. Like, who cares? Michael Jordan's not playing basketball anymore. Nothing's gonna change what happened in those years, and it's like what happened, and it's whatever. It's like with Isaiah Thomas. Like Isaiah Thomas, he regrets not shaking hands with Michael Jordan, but in the end, it is what it is, and he lived with that decision. So it's, and not only that, but he also gave you 6 rings. Again, the team was great. But he was the main catalyst and the main reason why the team was so great. And he got 6 titles, arguably the most infamous 6 titles in NBA history. And this is how they go in and treat him. It's similar to what JJ Redick is doing with Doc, actually. And how he's just going back at him. And here we go. We got Crucial PG in the chat. Jordan couldn't win without Pippen. Yes, that is you are absolutely right about that. He couldn't win without Pippen, but at the same time, Pippen couldn't win without Jordan. So, and regardless, like Jordan was the face of that Chicago Bulls team. So it's not like they would have even tried to be good without Michael Jordan. So he was obviously the catalyst, and that's sort of what I meant by him being the catalyst of those championships and the fact that he gave them those championships. Because without him, they wouldn't... Okay, I can't really say that they wouldn't be in a position to compete, because with 1 year without Michael Jordan, they were able to make it pretty far. But at the same time, again, it's Michael Jordan. Crucial PG says, Crucial PG says, because there's a lot of stuff that he types in the chat. I think it's more of the way they were talked about in The Last Dance but yeah, I do agree it should. I mean, that's sort of what I talked about like throughout this entire segment, because like he was saying things that wasn't all true. Like, it wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either, if that makes sense. But it was skewed in a way that sort of favored him, which was obviously in a way that would piss a lot of Chicago Bulls players off, because it just made it seem like, oh, all those things that I did, all the workout that I put in, and all the training that I put in with Michael Jordan, like, he's just throwing that under the rug and he's giving himself the credit. Like, really, wow, what a narcissistic, because that's Jordan, the narcissist. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it should have been, Crucial PG also thinks that it should have been left in the past, and it really should have, because, like, again, it doesn't affect much. It doesn't affect Pippen's legacy, because his legacy is already, he is the Robin to Jordan's Batman. So it's not like this, it sort of just feels like it's complaining now at this point. And nobody likes it when people complain, especially grown men who don't play basketball anymore and are already Hall of Famers. Like, what do you have to complain about? But I digress on that topic. So with that, we're out of time with the second segment. So now we are going to go into the third segment, where I deep dive into my sadness and I talk about why I think the Nets replaced Jack Vaughn mid-season, and just completely ruin the Brooklyn Nets season. And I'll just see you after this break. I'm really sad.